Besides that, welcome to the BRZRKR panel, a chat with the creators. Today we're going to be speaking with two of three of the masterminds behind one of the highest selling comic books out there. Fun fact that I learned today, the first issue is the highest selling original title of the 21st century, which I think is remarkable, especially in today's kind of comic industry. I don't think you see numbers like 650,000 copies being sold like that. So we're in for a good treat today. Marco Feet, apologize. So yeah, we're going to be speaking with two or three of the masterminds behind it that helped, coming up and coming no-name actor Keanu Reeves bring his comic book story to light. Wow, thank you out there for that one, too, live out there. All right. So between these two gentlemen, there's a combined almost 30-plus year experience of comic book making. There's also a longer list of accolades and award-nominated and winning comic book bodies of work. I can go on and on about the accolades, but we're actually fortunate enough because they are here with us today. So, HeroesCon 2023, let's give a warm welcome to our esteemed guests, Matt Kindt and Ron Garney. Come on, let's give it up. Louder, y'all, louder. I didn't account for the long walk. It is a long walk up here. That's the only thing missing is some good wrestling. Hey, man, how you doing? Hey, Ron, how you doing? There we go. The moonwalk. No one wants to applaud the moonwalk? Did you guys not catch the moonwalk? They're a little tired. You know, it's midday Saturday. They've done a lot of steps already. But we're going to see if we can't get them hyped up. Matt, Ron, how's your convention going so far? How are you guys doing today?
It's great. I'm jacked up, ready to go.
That's what I like.
We love it.
Matt, your hair is all crazy too. That's how jacked up you are right now.
Yeah.
Many of you have been to Matt. You gotta see if you haven't been to Matt's booth. You gotta go check it out. It's like ridiculous.
Oh, Matt, you might have.
It's got a peep show thing where you look in and it's got all. It's just mind.
You can put your head in my mouth. That's really what you're going to do.
I will admit, I think Matt probably has one of the best booth setups at this convention for sure. The peep show alone is worth it. I'm telling you.
Peep show. You have to put your head in his mouth.
And there's a $1 peep show that it's all ages.
Oh,
it's PG-13.
There we go.
Thank God.
Absolutely. All right, Jess, how about we kick this off with this burning question I've had all weekend. I've been racking my brain around this subject here, thinking about BRZRKR, and that's, what's your beef with vowels, specifically the letter E? You know how hard BRZRKR is already to spell without regular, and now you're telling me without the letter E?
So the first meeting I had where Keanu was pitching the idea, and then we're in this conference room, and he's telling me the idea, and I'm taking notes and writing it down. And I know that this is day one of two. So day one is pitch the idea, and we sort of talk about what the series could be, and this and that. And then after that first meeting, I went back to my hotel room, and I was like, all right, tomorrow I got to come up with a bunch of notes on the length of the series and how the format and the structure and how we can tell the story. Because Keanu came with the idea of the character and some of the plot and kind of the end, this crazy ending. It's out now, so the sort of a cosmic ending. And I was like, oh, that's great. But how do we get there? You just looked at the pictures. But so I went home went back to my hotel room that night, and I was writing up notes and blah blah blah, and trying to come up with a title for it. And then the title was I kept typing BRZRKR, and it was red underline in Word. If you're a writer in Word, it underlines when you misspell it. And it kept underlining it in red, BRZRKR. I was like, how do you spell? What the heck is that?
Yeah,
how do you spell BRZRKR? I was like, well, there's no Z in BRZRKR, and I found that out that night, luckily by myself, not in front of a bunch of people. But I was like, oh, but it looks so much better with a Z in it. And then
so then it's awesome. It's like the universe saying, no, underlining.
Yeah, no, it was telling me. So then I was like, I'm just gonna leave it. It looks cooler that way, and we'll just we'll just make it and he liked it too. He's like, oh, it's like a code name, cool. With just the consonants.
The only thing missing from the actual comic was the little red squiggly line letting you know.
Yeah.
Not spelled correctly. But before we dive into the series and working with Keanu, I was curious, how did you two meet? What was your first interaction? What was your first interaction like?
Match.com.
Oh, Match.com. I was telling my buddy it was probably like Hinge or Bumble, but all right, Match.com, I like it. That's classic.
That's where you find all the best artists and writers.
Swipe right. Swipe right. Oh.
Ron, how did you meet Matt? Or what do you remember from your first meeting with Matt? Have you known him for a minute or a while?
No, we didn't know each other at all, honestly.
We met at Hall H in San Diego.
Yeah, we met
that's true.
on a Zoom call.
Okay.
And we talked for a while, and then we met in person for the first time in San Diego. Yeah, and I walked up to him, saw him, gave him a big hug. Said,
my back went like pop, pop, pop.
Matt, what do you remember from your first interaction or meeting with Ron? Because I'll admit, meeting you, Ron, today, I was like, did this guy just leave a Mr. Olympia competition to come to the comic convention?
Yeah, 60-year-old Olympia.
Still in great shape, man.
Thank you.
Yeah. Audience, does Ron not look good, man? 60-year-old, come on, man. Easy 245 bench right there. Matt, what do you remember from your first?
Yeah, I just remember I was like, well, there is one
This
fit
guy
person
back
in
here
comics.
shaking his head. He's not having it back there. So,
Yeah, no, I was like, there's one fit person in comics that doesn't sit at his desk all day, like hunched over it.
I'm paying the price for it though, because I do jiu-jitsu and I lifted weights for years, yes, but now my joints are screaming at me to stop. So anyway,
we need to leave to go ahead and sponsor this panel right here,
Exactly.
Bayer or something.
Exactly.
All right. Well, if you both were at a bar with colleagues and peers in comics, which person has the better stories? Has a better industry or bar stories? That's what I want to know.
Dude, you do. I don't have it.
I have a lot of
I'm at home alone
stories.
all the time. I got no stories.
I've got good ones, but I see 2 children in the back, so. And my son.
Good sir, do you mind just covering their ears for a quick second? I'm kidding. All right. Well, I guess let's go dive into the project itself. What do you speaking about first introductions and meetings? I'll start with you, Ron, and then we'll go to Matt. What do you remember as far as your first introduction and meeting with Keanu Reeves, and how much convincing, if any, did Boom Studios have to do to get you guys on the project? What was that whole kind of like kickoff like?
Well, I was on my way out of Marvel. I was ending my contract, and I wasn't going to renew it. I wasn't sure what I knew. I wanted to do something on my own, because I have a lot of ideas myself. And then I got this call or an email, and then a call from Boom. I think it was Eric, the editor, or Matt, one of the two. And they said, we were wondering what your availability was. And I said, I just left Marvel. I said, I don't know what I want to do. I really don't want to get into any other big projects right now. I think I want to take some time, And so they said, well, we're doing this book with Keanu Reeves. And I said, okay, the movie star, obviously. But I was under the assumption, I just assumed maybe it was something he was just branding. And so, like William Shatner's Tech Ward or something like that, So I just didn't, I was like, okay, well, I don't really want to jump into anything. And they're like, well, can we at least do a Zoom meeting with you? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And they said something like, oh, Keanu loves your work. And I didn't believe them.
Oh, wow.
And evidently they had shown him my stuff. I was a little distracted because I thought they meant he had been reading my work for years. And that was like, I'm like, no way, And then I realized that they meant that they showed him my stuff because they were looking for artists. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, yeah, I'd be willing to talk to you about it for sure. And I said, well, we can do a Zoom meeting on Wednesday at 1. So I pressed the Zoom meeting button, and bing, there's Keanu Reeves there.
Oh, wow.
And him.
Sorry.
And they're just looking
You're like,
at
move,
me.
Matt, move.
And he's like, he's like, Ron, or whatever it is he says. But we talked for a while. And I thought Matt was very shy. I remember because he was
It's true. I am.
He was. He was sitting there like with his profile of the camera. And he would just kind of answer and talk and look. And so I'm like, man, this guy's really shy.
I was just staring at my own face the whole time on Zoom.
That's the default thing to do on a Zoom meeting. It's like,
and Keanu was quiet too at first, but I I just kind of kept trying to lighten the mood and make jokes and things like that. And we all lightened up. We're having a good time after a while. And then, what am I going to do? Say no, at this point? I mean, it was a great, I felt like it was a good fit, good feeling. I didn't know anything about the project before that. I mean, I knew it had been going on for like a year, I guess, right? Or something.
Yeah, I think, because it took us a while to figure out the plot and outline and the script and everything.
Well, there was another artist, which we don't get into, but so I didn't know anything about it, and then
So it sounds like you were brought in, maybe not at the very beginning. Matt, can you recall what it was like at the very beginning, getting the project?
Yeah, and I don't think I was the first person they called either.
I think you were.
I don't think I was, but we won't talk about that either. Because I don't want to talk about what I don't know about. What I do know is that the editors called me up and they're like, hey, I'd been working on Grass Kings and Black Badge for Boom. And so I had pretty good relationship with them, and they called me up. They're like, hey, would you be interested in co-writing a book with Keanu? And I was like, well, I don't want to. It's weird because I don't want to be the person doing all the work. And then I'm just like writing something, and then Keanu's putting his name on it, right. And it's this kind of a sellout thing where it's like stars put their name on it, and then
is that a common? I mean, you don't have to say any names, but is that a common thing?
I don't know if it's common, but I've seen it happen, know. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So I told him, I was like, okay. I was like, well, what's the idea? What's the idea? Like, does he have an idea? And they were like, yeah, it's like a mortal warrior, he can't die or whatever, and he lives forever. And I was like, I was still like, I don't know. I was like,
there's an android sent back from the future.
Yeah, there's literally the immortal warrior from Valiant, which I had done some writing for them too. I was like, I don't know, that doesn't sound like good. They're like, so I was like hemming and hawing about it, and then they're like, well, just come out. How about we'll fly you out, have a meeting with him, and let him pitch it to you. I was like, well, okay, I'll take that meeting just so I can like brag to my daughter, hey, I met Keanu Reeves and whatever. And so I went out there. And they pitched the idea to me, and when he pitched it to me, there was definitely more to it than the it's out now, so like all the cosmic stuff and all of that. And when he pitched it and got to that part, I was like, people are gonna hate that. It's gonna be great. Like it appealed to me. I was like, people are not gonna like that.
You're like that
ending.
That controversy?
But I was like, it's. I thought it was super cool, and this idea of this guy who is like a. He's like spreading technology with this being, and like he ends up, and then we had 3 different variations on an ending, and no one's going to be happy with any of them, but that's what I kind of liked is that it went to places I didn't expect.
Yeah.
So I was like, I came there just so I could brag to my daughter when I got back, and then I left thinking like, this is going to be amazing. And he was totally invested, and I could tell that he was going to be not just like, that wasn't it. It was like, we're going to be working on every single page of every issue. Wow. And me having to hear dialogue read out loud that I wrote that sounds dumb when you read it out loud, and then we fix it, So it was a long process. But then, so that's kind of how it started. Then we started just churning it up. And I got home and I told my daughter, I was like, hey, guess who I had a meeting with? She's like, who? Before I left is what happened. This is what happened. Before I left, I was like, guess who I'm going to meet? She's like, who? I was like, Keanu Reeves. And she's like, what does he do? And I was like, that defeats the whole purpose of this trip. And then when I got back and she's like, Daddy, I know who he is now. We watched Much Ado About Nothing in school for the Shakespeare, where they were reading Shakespeare. And I was like, that's how you know? I was like, all right, we're gonna, and then we watched The Matrix and Bill and Ted's, and now she's more well versed. But
imagine if you would have led with a photo and she would have looked at it like, "Is that Jesus? Who are you with?"
My wife had a completely different reaction.
What was your wife's reaction?
She was laying in bed, and I walked in. I said, "You're never gonna guess what happened." She's like, "Normally she doesn't look up from her phone because she's playing like Candy Crush or something." And so she's like this, and I'll tell her something. She'll be like, "Oh, that's nice." And then this time I said, yeah, so I guess Keanu Reeves wants to do a book together. And then she just goes like this. Just drops the phone and looks at me, what? And then when I first had a Skype meeting with him, just him and I, like, You could hear her pressing her ear against the door. My son too was like, so it was different reaction.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. Every Zoom call, it's funny how like it's empty or wherever you're at, and all of a sudden there'll be somebody walking by or like family members, friends, like just cool. Hanging out. I'm like, I'm busy here. Like,
Matt, I'm glad you brought up that eventually like you were sold on like his enthusiasm about the story. Because that I had a similar feeling watching a couple of interviews getting ready for this panel, and I forget what outlet it was, but they had asked about like, hey, Keanu, do you like comic books? And this guy was spitting off like Love and Rockets, Frank Miller books, like a wide range of comic books, and I was like, oh shit, this might. Okay, I'm really interested now. Did you guys have like a similar kind of experience where maybe like he impressed you with like his awareness and knowledge of comic books?
Yeah, you know what he impressed me with? Not comics, but there's like a lot of science and like quantum physics and like all that stuff. And he, I know that stuff in like a comic book way. You know what I mean? Like Fantastic Four stuff. And then he started spouting off like real science to me, wow. About how things work, and then quantum position, and then spitting all these words. And so I just started like writing them down. I was like, okay, I'll look that up later. I'll look that up later. So like to me, what impressed me about him was like his knowledge of like real world science and like how stuff works, and so that's what he brought to it, and then the stuff that he or I didn't know, he has his Keanu powers, so he would set up a meeting with like a quantum physicist, and so we'd have these Zooms with these scientists, to talk about like how does it work, like all the stuff in there is based on how things work or how they think things work, because some of it we don't know. So we'd have these Zoom calls where I'm like, can you use word, like talk to me like I'm like just a regular dude.
Explain like I'm 5. You're like,
yeah.
What about you, Ron? Did you have like a moment of like, okay, this guy is the real deal. He's serious about making a comic book.
Yeah. There were a few moments. One night he Skyped me at like 10 o'clock at night, and he was showing me judo moves he learned on the John Wick set. So that was weird.
Was it just like, hey, check this out, or was it like?
Pretty much, yeah. I was like, I'm just saying that, like, am I on candid camera or something? But no, there was a moment I actually talked about in an interview where, he said right away on our first meeting, he said, do you mind if I give notes back on want to change something here or there? And I'm like, or should I just get lost? And I'm like, yeah, just get lost. And I'm like, no, of course you can, as long as I don't have to redraw entire pages or something, because then it's, it takes a lot of time. But I knew right from the get-go that he takes real pride in what he does, and he has a vision. And I always told him from the beginning, it's your baby. I'll do what you want. And so right from the get-go. But there was one moment where I really knew how focused he was, and I talked about in another interview where I had drawn BRZRKR's house in Seattle, Washington, and there was a carport in the house attached to the house, and I. In sketching it out and stuff, I put a chimney on, and I remember thinking, well, that chimney probably wouldn't be there, but I didn't think anybody else would catch it. I was going to move it on my own. And freaking the first note I get back is the chimney's on the wrong side of the house. And I'm like, oh my God.
That's right.
I saw the same thing. I'm like, that's when I knew how focused he was, So. Yeah,
no, he notices that stuff. And then before that, though, we had to Google like image search, like find the right house or like find the right, because everybody, he was concerned with every part of it, like the house that he would live in, and like what does that look like, and so we had to figure out, like what's the coffee table, what's the furniture, what would he have, would he have a flag up or not have a flag up?
Wow.
All this.
Talk about it.
Was like detail. Intense.
Yeah. Matt, did you have and Ron, if you want to chime in too, was there ever maybe a particular moment, page, scene, whatever it may be, where maybe he gave a piece of advice or correction, edit, that you felt like, oh, wow, I didn't think about that, or this really makes, the story that much better, or vice versa, where you guys gave a piece of feedback where he was kind of receptive, like, oh, that's really cool.
He did. I'll say all the dialogue in there, the way our process would work is we would brainstorm just talk out the whole issue, and I would write up notes, and I'd type up the outline, and then we'd go over that and write that up. And then while we're doing that, we'd have dialogue, or he'd come up with some dialogue, and I'd type that in there, and then I'd come up with some. And then when I would actually write the first draft of the actual script, I would fill in all of the dialogue that we hadn't come up with ideas for, but the stuff that has to connect it all together. And then, like, the worst thing, if you've ever written a thing and then you hear somebody read your stuff out loud, it's like the worst feeling in the world. So, like, imagine writing dialogue and then you're having Keanu read your dialogue out loud and, like, acting it out, and then he gets the real clunkers, like, he's like, that doesn't work. He's like, how about, and it's great. It was humiliating and also great to see him, like, just, like, shave the dialogue down and hone it down and then make it, like, and then, and he has a way of, and it's funny because, like, you can watch the films he's in too, and now I can see, like, oh, he does that. I'm not the only one. He does it all the time, and he's just, like, fine tuning that and making it sound right, for him to deliver it.
Wow.
So, like, all the dialogue in there, it's like it was great because it made it so that he's delivering the lines. Even
it's like he's bringing his, like, practical experience making movies to, like, comics, and that I think that's like a unique way of bringing, like, acting to comics. If it doesn't feel right saying it, then
you definitely realize how much the movie. I mean, because really, comics are a short form of movie making in a way. I mean, it's storytelling and it's storyboarding, and you have to choose shots and camera angles, and it's all the same for the most part. So, I think Keanu sort of seamlessly just slipped right into the role, of comic book storyteller because of all of his experience in movies. I had a couple of things with him. Back and forth with him a couple of things. Actually, right in the very beginning, this is where my experience was a little different because he wanted me to draw a truck coming into the panel from the right, and Berserker was sitting on a park bench, and in some parks they're one ways because of pedestrian tracks, so they design them for one-way streets, right? And so. He wrote back, "Can I have the car coming in?" And so I sent back, said, "Well, this, I just assumed this was going to be a one-way street, so it's coming in, and it works better for the flow of the panel because it's coming in from left to right." So we were out to dinner, and that came up, and he goes, "Yeah, that was some kind of bullshit." "Oh, I'm sorry, sir." And so I was like, "What?" So I sent him a little article about how it's for pedestrian traffic, they make one-way streets, and so he writes back, he's like, "Ha! In Garney I trust," like that. So that won him over,
That's cool.
So there's little things like that. But there was also a scene where there were a few panels that were sort of repetitive.
Do you remember I just remember the end scene where Diana's sitting next to B at the end or whatever, and he was very specific about how he wanted.
Oh yeah,
you had him holding hands or something, and then he's like, "No," he's like, "I don't want." And so then we had to we called you up, and then we posed as B and Diana so that you could see what we're doing in the Zoom.
Picture,
and then I was like, screenshot this and send it to me later.
And it shows Keanu and Matt lean into each other, like holding each other. And Keanu writes, "family." Yeah, it was funny.
That's awesome. Let's fast forward to the day that the first issue drops, and goes on to make history. Like I said in the opening, I believe like the tally that I found was like it sold over 650,000 copies. It's the highest selling original title of the 21st century, and I think anything of the 21st century is one hell of a flex, right? Like, where were you guys at when the first issue dropped? Like, what was your emotions and reactions seeing like this book continue, like these numbers rack up? Oh, yeah.
Well, I got a call from one of the guys at Boom. They're like, "Oh my God, we can't believe what it did." I don't think they expected it to go as high as it did, and they expected it to go even higher. This was sort of snowballing. So I was just happy, that it was such a success right from the starting gate. So.
Yeah, that stuff's abstract to me. I was probably knee deep in like issue 5 or something, so I didn't. That's cool. I'm glad. Well, you know, it's nice. I like that people are reading it, and I was like, I hope that there's 600,000 individuals reading it.
Yeah.
You know, and but I just like I love comics, and I want comics to do well. So like anything that's like bringing people to comics that haven't read comics, that's a win. And I was excited about that. I remember even like I don't think Keanu realized like what he kind of did.
Wow.
Like you try to tell him, I was like, look, this is like huge, and you know we're getting people that don't read comics or haven't read comics or are a fan of John Wick, and I talked to people this weekend. They're like they love John Wick, and then
See you later.
It's like their first comic. And but yeah, I think that's the part I was excited about. I was like, I think we did something good for comics. You know?
It was such a shot in the arm, I think, for the industry. You know, just for the unique sort of, well, what's this? You know, what even the name, like the Z, and it was just so different.
Yeah.
You know, and then the Kickstarter and everything was such a, you know. So I think, like anything, it was sort of a breath of fresh air, I think, for the industry to create something new and different that, you know, regardless of how many time travel stories or time stories or these kinds of stories are out there, this was still sort of unique in its approach. And, you know, and I do, obviously, Keanu being a part of it,
Star power.
You know, obviously, so it's going to get people like bees to honey, you know, because he's so loved. But it's an even better surprise when the story is so interesting and cool and in depth and so, you know, broad and epic. And it really is, in my opinion, a metaphor for Keanu himself.
Like most of his work, right?
And when you draw these things for 2.5, you have this symbiotic relationship when you draw all these guys. It's like, you know, you have Keanu in your head 24 hours a day and Matt in your head. I'm like, get out of my head.
I was having weird dreams definitely while we were working on this thing.
That's why I said when I did that cover, like his bloody face staring at me, you know, I'm like,
I like what you said, Ron, about this being a series that injects, like, as a shot in the arm is what you said. And it got me thinking of watching, like Keanu Reeves was on like NBC Today, and he's explaining to Al Roker and his crew, like comic books. Like it almost feels like he's breaking it down. Like, well, it's a comic book, you know, there's panels and this and that. And I was like, man, this is so cool that someone of his star power and magnitude is helping to, you know, even though, you know, for us, it's like, well, it's comic books, duh. Like, there's no need to explain it. But, you know, Keanu Reeves is appealing and spreading the message to, like, you know, such a wider audience that might not be as knowledgeable. I was just like, man, he's such a cool champion for it, you know.
Yeah. Because most, let's be honest, a lot of global stars like that might not look at comic books that way. I mean, they do for the purposes of being an event, you know, Avengers Endgame as a job or something. But for the guy to actually get down into the trenches and make a comic book himself, you know, and be that much of a part of it was a unique thing. I mean, I think it sort of raised the eyebrows of the entire industry. But what? Keanu Reeves is actually getting down in here with us and making a comic book, you know. You know, and obviously there was some skepticism, but it's just going to be a movie and stuff. No, he really genuinely loved doing it. You know, loved the process of it. Really enjoyed it. I think it was something different for him.
Respect.
That's what I promise you that he's probably the only A-list star that's ever discussed balloon placement on a comic book page. You know, I was like, I'm not even kidding. It's like we had whole conversations about sound effects too. Remember, we had tons of sound effects in the first issue, and it was like covering up your art and everything. And then we talked about.
You said something to me recently. You said, "Oh, you don't know some of the notes. I couldn't let him get through." One time he was saying, "Why did Ron put a shadow under his nose there?" Or like, he's like, "No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." I'm like, "Oh my god, thank God you were there."
Yeah, this is fascinating. The minute details that he's sharing, right? Like I'm expecting, like, no, not enough blood, not enough gore, or you know, tone it down.
Say that to me.
Oh, he told you too much.
Yeah. No,
what was that?
He told me I didn't.
Oh, up it up.
Yeah. Because I was with Marvel for so long that you know I had to tone it down most of the time because you know, and this I didn't have to, and so him, you know, can we make it more violent?
Right, we can't see the ribs sticking into the guy.
Yeah, right, literally. Oh, let's rip the horse's jawbone out. You know, and so I'm like, okay, all right, I'm right there with you. And so I just went to town and made it that much. And then I went kind of bat crazy, crazy about it. was like I was a little bee, tiny bee, as we lovingly call him, like jumping off
baby
of
bee,
horses,
yeah.
and, and just it became, like I've said in the past, a ballet, a symphony of violence. So I tried to make it feel orchestral almost, like I was Hannibal Lecter, like slashing the blood everywhere. So.
You know what, Ron, since you bring up the violence, I had read somewhere where you were talking about being able to go to dark places to achieve the level of violence and gore necessary for the story. But you also said like you had an aversion to it outside that like that headspace. It almost seemed like if you weren't actively working, then it was like, this is like too much for me. Like, how do you walk that line? And do you have like maybe any creative rituals or like other pop culture that you visit to like get into that headspace?
Well, I'm a musician too. Music sort of can rescue anyone from those kinds of things. I mean, you can't allow yourself. I mean, I have to get to a certain space, but it's different because I'm orchestrating it and I'm illustrating it, and so I'm sort of. I think the thing that scares us about violence is where it happens out beyond our control. So it's different when you're doing it yourself, you're drawing it, you're sort of in control, you're playing the creator, So I don't think it has the same impact that when you see something that's, we can go down a highway, you see a bad accident, it's something that happened out of someone's control. That's why we pay so much attention to violence, because we want to control it. So, I think I'm a musical person. I'm actually a very gentle person for the most part, I think. I like to think I am. Most people might not say that who know me, but I think I am, because of doing jiu-jitsu and things like that. But I think being musically inclined and things, I just find a space that's just separate from all. So, yeah.
Okay, well said. Matt, I'm going to toss this one to you on the topic of creative process. You're no slouch. You're no stranger to scripting and writing comics and being like the lead guy to tell the story. What was it like to be put in a position where you're collaborating and you're bringing someone else's story to life? Like, did you learn anything new? Did you like take anything from that experience going forward?
Yeah, no, it was interesting because I hadn't really, the only other time I'd ever co-written anything was with Jeff Lemire. We'd done a couple of things, and then our process on that was always just get some coffee, talk about an idea. One of us types up an outline, and then we just chop that outline into pieces. And like, okay, you write that part, I'll write this, and then we stitch it together. So that's the only co-writing I'd ever done. But this one was different, where he came in and he had an idea for this character and sort of like the setup for it, and then kind of the ending. And I was like, okay. And so then I was like, well, how do we build this out? How big does it need to be? And then I'm thinking about format. And as we go along, it starts to become obvious that we need like other characters. So we needed like Diana as sort of the foil for him, who's sort of like not a therapist, but a therapist, somebody he can talk to and somebody that's trying to help him. And so I sort of came up with that character to sort of bounce off of him. And then the third major character was what's his name? Who's the cult leader guy? I can't remember his name right now. I can't remember. Keanu came up with a name for him. Caldwell, yeah, Caldwell. And so I came up with that guy because I started he had this bigger idea, and then I started populating it with it. Yeah, and Caldwell was mine because I was like, this guy. Anytime I approach any story, I'm like, okay, well, if this is the premise, doesn't matter what it is, Marvel comic, any kind of like crazy idea, like what would it be like, but for real, like what's the real world? How would it be, or how people interact, or what would they do? And I was like, if this guy lived 80,000 years and he can't die, but his body gets blown apart sometimes and pieces are all over, I was like, well, what happens to those pieces? And then what do people do that have seen him or known this person and they see him come back? I'm like, there's definitely a religion or a cult that's built up around this guy, and then so that's how I came up with Caldwell. And it was like this whole cult thing, and then Keanu was like, I think he was like lukewarm on all that idea at first, but then he came around as we saw that we sort of needed somebody to be his enemy or be his like kind of frenemy, I guess, for a while, and and then and me personally like the idea because it's sort of like and I don't like metaphors and stories and everything, but I was like, well, this is like it's a cult of personality for this character. And I think that Keanu there's a parallel there in real life. You have this person who everybody knows, but nobody knows him, and so we have this character people know him, nobody knows him, and this idea of people wanting a piece of him, and sort of like having a little piece and being obsessed with him and everything. I was like, it seemed critical to me to have that as part of the story, because I think Berserker is like a super personal story, in so many ways that I'll never get into, but it's there. You know it too, but so I think that that was where my part came in. Then I was like, I am co-writing it. I'm not taking his idea and just making it, formatting it into a script that you can draw. We were inputting into it, like some of our ideas and reacting to things he was coming up with. And to me, I had to do it that way. Otherwise, it would have been boring. I think just to like execute somebody else's thing.
Well said. I know for me, the series subverted my expectations. Like, I think if you only stick with the first issue, I think, it kind of misleads you into thinking it's going to be, a John Wick meets Immortal and all this. But I think as the story progresses, it really starts paying off in like really existential and like you said, like metaphysical ways that, you wouldn't have expected from seeing like the name on it or the covers. Did I trigger something?
I have.
Oh yeah, please chime in.
Well, I'm just thinking about when you say that, just having worked on it for so long, that I feel like sort of it was writing itself through Keanu at one point. It seemed like that to me. Like, I think when again, that's a metaphor for him. That's my opinion. I think when you're somebody of that stature, well, like look at any of these guys, like Elvis or the Beatles, or they tend to. How do you handle being deified by an entire world, basically, And I think that is coming through in that story, and the cult and everything else, and how they're responding to a piece of them, throughout the centuries, little fingers, things like that. I mean, how does the person, the object of that, deal with that? Because you didn't ask for it, So what do? The Beatles go to the Dalai Lama, or Elvis, even though he was a Southern, it destroyed him, because once his mother passed away, he had no one to help carry him through it, where like the Beatles had each other. Anyway, but someone like Keanu, he really is like that. I mean, there's so many people. Yeah, I've got so many private messages from people trying to get at him.
Yeah.
And I have to just sort of fend them off, and because they're sending videos and requests and begging and things like that, So it took me back. It was a real eye opener to what somebody like that has to go through, and the challenge for him, maybe being someone who truly seems to care about people. The challenge for him is navigating that in a gentle way, without making them all feel rejected by somebody that they are looking up to. You know what I mean? So it was a fascinating, to me, for me personally, it was a fascinating case study in all of it. So I was always thinking about it as I was working on it.
I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, I think, long story short, it does feel like a really personal story, and I appreciate that. Whether it was his original intent or maybe just Boom Studios letting that story breathe for 12 issues. I think it's not uncommon, or it's not uncommon for us to see actors, of all magnitudes enter the comic book space. I mean, just recently, Michael B. Jordan announced a Creed comic spinoff. Like Emilia Clarke had an Image series as well. Like, we're seeing stars enter this space to tell their story, but and I'm not pointing at anyone, but sometimes in the past it has felt like kind of a fly by night, kind of like just a quick cash grab. But this Berserker really did feel like it had something to it, as a personal story. And I guess with that being said, do you guys think, and considering the popularity of Berserker and the reception, 650,000 copies sold is insane. Do you think that is Do you think comics needs that, like that injection or that that boost? Do you think like that is something that you guys would want to see more happen as far as like big name stars enter the field and tell their stories, or do you feel like there's got to be certain barriers to put up?
I used to be a nightclub manager, right? Back in my younger days, and the one thing about that was we always had to reopen every couple of years under a different name, or just relaunch with brand new, remodeling of the club and things like that. And I did it for a good decade, and because people get bored easily, and they're like bees flying to flowers, and they take all the pollen off that, and they go, oh, look at these flowers over here, and then they go over there. And I think it's no different with anything creative like this. I think, we happened to do something that made all the bees come to our little thing, and so you have to keep finding ways to do that. And I don't necessarily think it has to be actors. I just think you have to. I mean, look at how many people in the world with it. You can't tell me we can't find infinite numbers of ways to get people interested, and be creative and really listen to new ideas. This guy here, he's got so many crazy, great ideas. I mean, he sends me this. I'm like, yeah, I have a few ideas. But he's like, no, send me some. I'll send you some. Sends me some, and it's a list like this long of like hundreds of different ideas he's got. I'm like, well, here's my 2. So that's the kind of guy you need right here. Cool. This guy, it's people like that who are, just so want to just be an open thing where the stuff is pouring out of, but the trick is getting people to really understand and really be interested in supporting that and nurturing it and seeing the genius behind these ideas, what they could be. It's all possibilities, and it never ends. Nothing ever ends. Just keep going on. But like I said, I don't know if it necessarily means actors. But yeah, it's nice to have people who are,
they have that star power and that draw.
Star power, sure.
Well said. Well said, Matt. On that same topic. Dream collabo. If you could collaborate with anyone, whether they're in Hollywood, actor, or musician, or from another field that you think, man, they've got stories to tell that would make great comic books. What are some names that come to mind?
Dude, I have no idea. Who would I collaborate with? I don't know.
Oh man, he's got this thing with. You guys see this Louis LaRosa thing he's working?
Yeah, Louis LaRosa is. I don't know if you know his art, but we just did a Kickstarter for the book we've been working on for a few years called Megalith, and
yes,
his art's amazing. Like I've never seen anything like it. He doesn't work like anybody I know, and nothing looks like it.
I don't know how he does it.
Yeah, I've seen he was here a few years ago, and I just assume he uses photo reference and does a lot of prep or whatever. And I saw him sitting at his table doing a commission ninjak or something, and he was just coming right out of his head to the paper. I couldn't believe it. It was like photoreal,
it's like film negative, like coming out. Remember the old cameras? Like you get a picture in a minute. It's like you watch it form. That's what it looks like to me. It's like his brain is like one of those instant cameras.
Yeah, he's just transferring.
He puts it down, and you just see it to start to form from a film negative. It's like uncannily well drawn and accurate, and just. I just don't even know how it happens.
Yeah, So I collaborated. That doesn't count because I collaborated with him. I talk to Jeff Darrow every once in a while. He lives in France now, so I'll talk to him, and then I'm always like hinting around like, oh, when you're done with your Shaolin Cowboy, which is I don't think he's ever going to be done with. I was like,
you're like, I might be free. I might be free.
I got 1,000 ideas I could send you to pick from.
Did you ever tell him because I had him in my head when I was doing some of the BRZRKR scenes.
Yeah. No, I told. He's a big fan of that stuff, and he's so funny. What a great guy. I've been a fan of his forever too. It's like before I was in comics, I was buying Hard Boiled and like, who is this?
Yeah, classic.
And then he did a John Wick. I don't know if I can tell. I guess I'll tell the story. Darrow did a John Wick triptych posters for John Wick, the first John Wick. They commissioned him to do them as a variant poster or something, and then he did them, and then turned them in, and then they never used them.
Oh wow!
And I was like, oh, I'd love to see him. And send him to me. So he sent me. He had just like a fuzzy little JPEG is all he had left of it, but. He sent it to me, and I was like, immediately realized why they didn't use it, because it was the most violent, brutal, like images I've seen. It was like, it really was like Wick was like cutting a throat, and there was blood everywhere, and it's like it was like the most amazing thing I've ever seen. But I was like, yeah, they're not going to use that
for your eyes only.
Yeah.
Do you know what you're saying when you're saying that this poster was too violent for John Wick, right? Like the bar is pretty high.
I promise you.
Said,
I promise you.
At the San Diego Con, I brought that up because saying it's not. I'm like, how can you say that it's not violent, John Wick? I mean,
yeah,
that's crazy. Only Jeff Dara. Okay, so 10 minutes left to this panel. I do want to welcome any questions. I'm going to ask one more, give you guys a chance to collect some questions. I might walk down here and hold the mic so we can hear it. But the question for you two, where does the story go next? And can we expect more from this? Are you guys going to be involved with I know there was an announcement for a live action adaptation, anime adaptation. I know there's a one shot with Steve Scroce that's also being put out as well. Like, where does the story go? What does your involvement in future Berserker stuff look like?
Yeah, I can tell the Netflix is doing live action, and they're working with a Japanese company to do the anime, and that's all currently in like production, various stages of production. Screenplay we've seen like drafts of the screenplay and everything, and so they're working on that. They kind of had to wait on the screenplay till we were done so we could see how we were going to end it.
Yeah,
because we really had like branching 3 ways to go, and we didn't really want to decide until we wrote to that point, you know.
Right.
And so they had to wait on that. So they're getting close on that, and then I forgot what else is happening. Oh, and then I think the plan is to do a series of like one shots or annuals or specials, like 48 pages. So like periodically, I don't know if it's quarterly.
We're always going to be, involved in it because we sort of are in it. We kind of have a stake in it.
Right. We can't not be a part of it.
Yeah, we can't not be a part of it. So I think, the 3 of us will always do something. We're going to actually do another 48 pages. It was 40, now it's 48 again. Because it's going to be another. Yeah. So we're doing that probably towards the end of the year. That's going to be, it's not going to be under a schedule as much. I'm going to do it in the fall. He's already done with the script for the most part. But I'm going to do it in the fall when things hunker down and it's colder outside. It's a fun time to do that kind of stuff. So there'll be that, and I'm sure there'll be other things down the road because we do have a stake in it, especially when the movie starts being made and things like that. I'm sure we'll be involved somewhere in there. Who knows at what capacity. So it's always going to be in our lives at this point. Who the hell predicted it? But here it is. So
for better or worse, hopefully for better. Who would be more excited about more Berserker stuff? There we go. Good. All right, let's
clap over there.
Yeah. All right, let's open it up with some Q&A. Who's got some questions for our guests? All right, I'll give them time to think. Who's got some questions? Any questions? Oh, here we go.
You guys are amazing. The fact that you guys were able to bring this to Boom Studios and have this shop there and be made, were you guys getting a lot of pushback with like editorial and everything, or it's just basically you guys were the top 3? Versus like if it was like made in the big 2, you guys would have to go back and forth with a lot of like behind the tape, if that makes sense.
There was no pushback. I remember that the first meetings, the next day when I came back with like an idea for the structure and the outline, I pitched the 12-issue thing, and I saw Keanu's eyes lit up, and I saw all editorial were like, there were like 12 issues. And I was like, I knew that we were going to get to 12 because his eyes lit up. Whatever. They're not gonna say no to Keanu, so there was no interference.
Was that kind of like the trump card above all? It's like Keanu wants it, and they're like, okay, God darn it.
They were Keanu's approval.
Yeah, they were just running like blind into this thing for the most part. The sense I got is they were just, it was a work in progress trying to figure out how to do it. That's the way it was conveyed to me is like they were just as sort of like, okay, how do we do this? And then when that came in, it was like, obviously it's, whoa, this is a big deal. So they were kind of like deer caught in headlights at first, but they handled it brilliantly, I thought. So
All right. So we got 5 more minutes, folks. Any other questions? We got, I see 2. Let me go here and I'll go to you.
You've kind of referred to this. I'm just curious, why would A-star lister be interested in doing a comic? I know y'all worked with him for so long. What was his appeal to do that?
Yeah, I think it's the same appeal where you see screenwriters start working in comics because when you work within a system like Hollywood where there's like so much money involved and so many people putting their hand in, comics it really is like people start to realize the strength, why comics are magic. And it's magic because you have unlimited budget, you have no interference, and it's the pure voice of the author and the writer on the page. There's nobody else involved, like ideally, it can happen, but it's the only art form like that other than like prose writing where you can sit and write your novel by yourself. It's only a visual medium like that where you can just tell your story exactly how you want to do it. And I think you spend a lifetime working in a system where everybody's trying to get a piece and everybody's trying to have their influence and do that thing. And you can come and tell a pure story that is, whatever, nobody's messing with or screwing up. And then the final product is the thing you wanted. There's no other place to get it in comics.
You have to be careful with the big two, though, because there's always that danger when it becomes the monstrosity that Marvel and DC, they become, because it becomes less about that, about the magic of that, and more about the, cliche as it sounds, is the bean countering, So, luckily there's enough people in it, I think, that keep it going in the direction of making magic rather than just making, in the comics at least. I've seen, over the last few years, seen some things happening that I don't think are as good as they could be, but, I do think things like, that's why BRZRKR was such a success, because, it reminds everybody of what it can be, so.
Well said. Good question. All right, we got one more question, and then we'll wrap this up.
Just curious, for you guys as creators, has this experience do you think it's going to have like a lasting effect on how you approach projects in the future for other stuff? Is it going to, the way, kind of the process worked with Keanu and everything, you think it's going to change the way you kind of approach projects for just your own, future comic stuff as well?
Yeah, I don't, I had never ever worked on it. It was a project this way where I was getting notes and comments and things, and I was like, oh, because I just wasn't used to it, so it was brand new in that regard. I mean, I literally went through 30 years over comics for 35 years, and I never ever had notes, one note really ever. I think maybe one time I got a note from a writer or I think it was Kurt Busiek, something about a case on a planet, glass case or something, but literally. And then all of a sudden, Keanu and Matt come in, and it's like,
none of those notes were from me.
And I was like, and I had to stand up for myself on a couple of occasions. Most of the time, if it makes it better, I'm all for it. I'm like, yeah, okay. And it actually was cool for me to have a second set, 2-second sets of eyes to go, oh yeah. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Actually, one of the last interactions, the last issue I had, we talked, and he conveyed to me his thought process on a bullets flying to the left or right or whatever, and I was like opposed to it.
That was me. I'm sorry about that.
No. But once you explained it, and I was like, yeah, okay, I see that, But it made it better, Couple things, like I said, you have to stand your ground a little bit on, because it's, it's in your head a certain way, and I was proud. It was one scene I was very proud of, and Keanu wanted it changed, so I got on the horn with him, and I explained to him why it worked for me, and he was fine with it, ultimately. So, I liked it, and I had to I couldn't complain anyway, because you should see how I beat up colorists over the years. I mean, really bad. You know, I would send them
That's a pecking order, right? Everybody got to pick on the guy below you. And the colorist is yelling at the letterer.
Bill Crabtree, even the first issue I got, first bunch of colors, I was on the horn with him for a while, and I just was explaining to him what, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it was funny with him. He's great, you know, because right after that, I never had to, everything that came in, I was pretty good with. It was all great, you know. It was like really nice work and genius in some ways, you know. Maybe a couple things here and there, but hardly much. So he clicked right away once I was telling what I was thinking, you know. So he's great.
That reminds me of it. My favorite thing that Keanu said was at the very beginning, because I was telling him, like, we were talking about the process, and I was like prepping him for it, because I was like, well, we'll write the script, and then the art will come in or whatever, and it may not be like exactly how you picture it in your head, right? And like we're describing it, but it's going to be a little different in the artist. Sure. You know what I mean? You're storytelling it too. Yeah. And I was like, it may not be quite what you want, or you may be disappointed or what you say. And he goes, Matt, I work in movies. And I was like, oh yeah. So, I was like, never mind.
That's good stuff. Solid questions. And that actually brings us to the end of our panel. Ron, Matt, do you guys want to, where are you guys at on the floor, table number wise? Where can people find you?
AA 707, AA 807.
807, yeah.
So we're right next to each other.
There we go. 707, 807 area. You guys make sure you stop by those tables. Let's give them a round of applause for being great guests.
Thank you, all of you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I salute you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining today's panel. You guys have been fantastic. Take care. Be well, y'all.
Now it's time for my rendition of Love Me Tender by Elvis Presley. Love me tender.